Thank you for joining us, everyone, for another episode of Live by Heart
Today
with your hosts, Dawn Spiegelberg and Wendy R. Wolf.
Hello and welcome to the Live by Heart Today show number 6. This is a show designed to help you navigate change, uncertainty, and the new world we found ourselves in. We'll talk a little bit about science, how our body works, we'll talk about intuition, and we'll talk about transformation. Our theme for today is the thought-provoking heart. For today's Heart to Heart, I'm happy to have with me today the show's co-host, Wendy R. Wolf, Professional Transformation Facilitator. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Dawn.
I'm so excited to talk about the thought-provoking heart today because in the last show, we discussed our nervous system and the natural response that our nervous system goes through because of what's happening in our environment. This week, we're talking about what our thoughts do when our environment is shifting us in and out of our different nervous system responses. So I'd just like to mention in a quick review, we talked about the two responses that our nervous system has. One is that we feel safe, and the other is that we feel unsafe. And these are responses that are natural based on something that's happening around us. So the first initial response is obvious, natural, something that we can't necessarily control. But the responses that happen beyond that are the things we can control. And so that's what we're talking about today.
Yes, I'm very excited about it.
So what would you like to say about our nervous system and what happens when we are feeling a threat?
Well, what I'd like to say is that on top of the sympathetic and parasympathetic we've talked about, that's where we experience all the incredible amount of different emotions that we experience.
Right. We did not discuss emotions last time.
But these are chemicals. These are information in our body that they die out pretty quick, like in a minute. How long, Dawn? We have a stimulus. How long?
That's a really good question. So when something happens, like when we're driving down the street and a ball rolls across the street in front of us, right? Everybody knows if there's a ball rolling, a child will follow it quickly thereafter, right? So what do? We slam on the brakes. It feels like it's an immediate response. So that's the speed at which our body identifies and has the ability to identify a threat in the environment and then do something about it. But then if the child doesn't run out, right, we've stopped the car and the ball keeps rolling, then the threat is gone and it's over. And that takes seconds.
So the cortisol, etc., stops being pumped and just dies down. And this is why I wanted to talk about thoughts next, because a lot of us have experience of emotions going on and on. And that is a lot about what we're thinking. I keep telling myself, oh, I need to be afraid. Or I'm telling myself, the kid's going to come. And I keep pumping that cortisol over and over, pressing the trigger. Is that correct?
You know, I love that you're mentioning this, because if I'm driving down the street, okay, and I'm thinking to myself, God, I'm going to be late, and I don't know if I'm going to get there on time, and I have to get there on time, and I can't believe all these things that happened that made me late, and then suddenly the ball rolls and you say, shit, right? So you've already preset your thoughts to, you're a little anxious and you want to get, something's happening, but it's not happening now, which means once you get that cortisol spike, then those same thoughts are going to continue. So you might end up saying, cursing some child in the ball, and oh my God, this is a street where they need to be more careful, and why the hell don't they do something better than they did, right? Like all of these things because of the thoughts that were preceding it, and then the
Yes.
cortisol spike just re-emphasizes what was already underlying it.
Yes. Yes. And we left to my own devices, especially in the past, like it hasn't happened for years, but left to my own devices, I can create this all by myself in my room, doing nothing. There's nothing to cause a spike. But I used to call it night thoughts. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and then I'd start to think. Big problem. And then I'd start to think scary things, worrying thoughts. And then I'd get nervous. And then it would just roll.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So when we have an external stimulus, right, that creates cortisol, and now we're in an unsafe nervous system response, right? All of that happens before we think about it. But what's true is that when we start thinking about something, that can further the cortisol dumped into our system. That can further expand our feelings of fear. So even if there wasn't an external something that initiated the response, you can begin thinking something that initiates that response. And so if I'm thinking something like, oh goodness, I forgot to turn off the oven at home, I'm going to explode, the whole house is going to blow up, and my husband's taking a nap, and is he going to notice, right? Like all these thoughts that are happening, you can continue thinking more thoughts and more thoughts along that same line that continue to propel you to more and more higher levels of stress.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can be our best friend or our worst enemy in here.
Yes, I would just like to mention that Eckhart Tolle said something like, everybody suffers from thinking, they just don't realize it. That's a not perfect quote, but you get the idea, right? Like we all think, and we don't realize that thinking can be a problem, or we can really leverage it for the good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I think you have, and I certainly have, changed how I think over time. And the quality of my life has shifted tremendously. It might not be all the thoughts, but other things have changed too. But the thoughts have really substantially shifted for me. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I was a young mother and not feeling very well supported, right? Because it was just my husband and me and an infant, and it was new, and there wasn't really anyone around to help very much or very often. I felt lots of responsibility, like the house must be spick and span, but I just wasn't capable of it with a newborn.
Mm-hmm.
Your whole focus is just trying to figure out when this child needs to eat, and the diapers, and oh my God, it's 6 o'clock at night, and all I did was feed this child and change diapers. I haven't even eaten myself. And it sounds ridiculous until you live it. Yes. And then you're living it and you're like, oh my God, what they said is true, right? Yeah. So yeah, the kinds of thoughts I was thinking then were actually, I didn't realize this, were thoughts that I had had before I brought that infant home, right? And they were accentuated during this time when I had a baby. And I didn't realize the foundation of my thinking tended to be worry, tended to be concern about the kind of housekeeper I was. And yeah, I've done a lot of work to change what I think about myself, what I think about others, how I take care of my children and my husband, and I'm in a much better place. And a lot of people say, oh, you're so positive. Oh, you say the nicest supportive things. But the truth is, it's not from the thinking, it's from underneath the thinking, right? It's the foundation of what's underneath my thinking. Mm-hmm. And a big part of that foundation is that I ensure I'm spending more time with my nervous system in the stress-free response, right? Mm-hmm. The safety response. And I do the things to support my own safety. And because I'm supporting myself in safety, it's capable for my mind to think of gratitude, right? We're in the middle of a bathroom renovation. The bathroom we were going to rely on isn't working. And so I'm grateful that we still have a toilet that's working, right? It seems
Yes.
strange, but I'm
That's awesome.
living in gratitude, right? Even though the walls are ripped out, there's no tub, it stinks in there. I got a toilet that flushes.
I'm so
And I'm
glad to hear it.
grateful. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's another part of coming out of the sympathetic, parasympathetic conversation last
Yes.
week. For me, as a meditation teacher and practitioner, I've noticed over time that when I feel safe, or someone I'm working with, when I feel safe, then my intellect, what I call the analyzer when I'm talking meditation, the analyzer can relax. The analyzer isn't grabbing the wheel. Like if I'm driving, right, I want my analyzer over here in the passenger seat. It's not allowed to drive, right? We think it wants us to think I'm the intellect, but I'm not the intellect. It's of service to me. It's supposed to look at the map and tell me how to get where I want to go and look at the spreadsheets and stuff. But when stress hits, when safety is not seeming real, the intellect just wants to grab that wheel. That's what I noticed. I know I went right into metaphor, and we've been talking about a lot of biology, but that's the experience for me.
Yeah, metaphor is good because what is our brain designed to do? Really? Our brain is designed to pick and choose, right? Our brain is designed to make a choice and to distinguish between something that's beneficial and something that's less beneficial so that we make the right choice. So our brain takes charge because it analyzes, right? Its job is to analyze, except if it's always in control in your driver's seat, then that's not beneficial, right? Because that's when the judgment comes. That's when I have a great example. I'm walking down the street with my son. He's on his scooter. I've got two dogs, right? And a couple's coming toward us. And they're an older couple, maybe late 50s, early 60s, right? And I'm doing something with the dogs, and my son goes ahead on his scooter, and we're on the sidewalk. And sidewalks are 4 feet, 3 feet wide. So then the next thing I know, the couple, right, they come upon me, I come upon them, and they stepped out to the road, and the man is smiling but shaking his head. And I was like, the only thing he could be shaking his head at is my child, right? So I say to him, oh, is everything okay? And he said, that child doesn't understand the 6 feet distance rule. And I was just like, what? Right? Like, huh? What's going on? And then we were passing. So that's all that was said. I didn't retort, rebut. I didn't say anything, but I got to thinking about it. My son is 10 and he's not going to take his scooter in the road, right? The option was go in the road, and then there was an embankment, right? He couldn't get on the embankment, and he knows not to go on the road. And this is an adult person saying, your child doesn't understand the 6 foot rule. And I'm thinking, you're an adult. You understand 6 feet. Why aren't you being generous? Why aren't you taking the higher road and making a choice instead of complaining about my child, right? So what's my brain automatically doing? I'm analyzing, is my son safe or not safe? Not around this man. He is not safe because he's not even kind, right?
Yeah.
He's an adult and complaining about a 10-year-old.
Yeah,
So,
it happens.
I just want to mention Deepak Chopra's gap between stimulus and response.
Yes.
There is a moment of time.
Yes. There's a moment. And I believe we can grow that gap.
Yes.
We can practice. There's a moment where we can practice and be like, do I have to have a response right away, or can I let it rest for a moment? And then I can choose my response instead of reacting. So, yeah. Which goes into my thing about being the driver of the car or the captain of the ship. Like, I can have the helm and choose more and more what thoughts. Go ahead.
And that requires a level of objectivity.
Yes.
And I have to thank you so much. You taught me something, and that is how to put myself in the driver's seat, which is interesting, right? Because my analyzer, I also think of the analyzer as myself. But when I say, oh, putting myself in the driver's seat, I'm actually not associating myself with the analyzer part of myself. Yes. So that beautiful exercise you showed me, which helps me be in the driver's side, is actually so beneficial to shifting out of that distinguishing, judging place. I mentioned
Yes.
this man and how I couldn't believe as an adult, he was talking about a 10-year-old not giving him 6 feet of space. But I realized the beauty of that situation was, one, we were passing, so I couldn't respond. And it gave me time to think and to feel and to wonder. And I was walking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So walking was flooding my brain so that I could see a little more clearly and, not get too irritated. And having an objective point of view is so important when you're looking at everything in the world.
Yes.
But it's so hard.
I just want to take a little left turn here because you just said something that's so insightful for me, which is flooding your brain. And last time you talked about it with stimulating the skin, how
Yes.
that brings a lot of information. But my honey has some attention issues. And when he goes into the woods, that goes away. There's so much information coming in. All he wants to do is be present. And I have a feeling that you might have put your finger on it. There's so much information coming in on so many levels, right? Onto the skin, the sounds, the visual, etc. All the senses are alive and awake and not stuck in the house in jail.
Yes. And one very important thing about woods that they're just starting to talk about, and that is the bioelectric field in the woods. It's different, right? They call it forest bathing now.
Yes.
Because we don't have the electromagnetic waves of our cell phones and our the microwaves and the radio waves and the lights that are putting off their waves, right? All of that is super stimulating. And when you get to the woods, you don't have that. It has its own calming effect. It helps you be grounded and connected to the flow of life rather than the frenetic way in which we expose ourselves.
Yes. And so just thanks for that little left turn, because like my attention is quite focused, but for him it's very hard to focus. But in the woods or in the natural environment, it's easy to focus. And you just might have helped me why that might be. That's really cool. And anyway, it helps him to take more control of his thoughts.
So this is interesting. We talked about squeezing, right?
Yes.
There are now, more than I've ever seen before, technical shirts that you can get. Like, for example, the people who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they have a relatively tight fitting shirt that you would wear under your other clothes that might really help him.
That's really neat. I will check it out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me swaddle in that man.
Yes, exactly. It's so beneficial. And you just feel so good. Like when I put on that, so we wear cotton gis, right? It's the Japanese overstyle clothes. But when you wear this tight fitting shirt underneath, you feel confident, right? Like I see these other guys in class and I'm just like, I'm grappling with you. I'll take you on.
Neato.
And that might not be normal.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So lots of benefits.
So one thing I like about the conversations that we're having, Dawn, over time, is that we're saying hello to the body. We're saying hello to the things in the world that we can do. We're saying hello to our thoughts and our feelings. We're saying hello to all the different mechanisms in our system, as well as like some below consciousness things as well. And I'm working a lot below consciousness. That's my work.
That's your specialty.
That's my specialty, in which, I give noticing and tools to what we don't always pay attention to. So I just really appreciate how we're just dancing through all these things. And And to close out, just this whole that we can be the driver of our car is a choice that we can make and keep practicing. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And I just want to shout out to you because you've really helped me see that gap between the space. You've really helped me become more objective rather than constantly assigning meaning to everything as good or bad. Your work has helped me personally really be able to embrace coherence where I may not have been able to do it quite the same way. I may not have been as successful without you helping me. So I want to thank you for that. And while I'm thanking you for helping me, now is a great time to take a pause and thank our sponsors, We Are Historically, for being a part of our show.
Thank you, We Are Historically, for your conscious brand apparel. Hooray!
Here we are back at the Live by Heart Today show, and Wendy and I were just talking about how our thoughts can be objective, how we can actually choose the kinds of thoughts we're thinking and lay a foundation for a much better outcome in our lives that directly affects our nervous system and the way in which we respond to the world outside us.
Mm-hmm.
So, Wendy, I would love a little more information from you about how or why or the necessity for taking control and responsibility for our insides. In one of our shows, you mentioned your insides and someone else's outsides, and maybe this is a great opportunity to come full circle about that, right? So what is it about our insides and other people's outsides and the environment that we should really be paying attention to?
There's like so many things I want to say in that question, but I will start with neutrality. That's what I call it's the practice when we start to be centered, not in the intellect and not in the emotions or the survival or the sexual impulses, right? There's an actual way to be in the body and not just carried away by all those horses. It's
Right.
really possible. And there's a practice and an intention to do it. And it's a muscle that we grow, right? It's like going to the gym. It's not like it just happens. We put ourselves in that intention and then we practice. But neutrality is a place where we're not carried away by all the judgment.
Neutrality is not assigning meaning to every little thing that happens. Mm-hmm. So what I love about it is that it pulls you out of living in polarity. Polarity yes. means you're always looking at the good or the bad, or you're looking for one or the other, right? So neutrality brings you up a level outside of something happened to me that was good or something happened to me that was bad, and it allows you to see more possibility, to see more solution to yes. the problem at hand. I love that.
Yes. And it reminds me, I listened, I don't know, a long time ago to a show that Carolyn Meese was doing.
Yes.
And she talked about, she was speaking to these things from her language. And she was saying, look, if you're in New York City and you're on the sidewalk, it's loud, it's cacophonous, and you can't see much. But if you go to the top of like one of the tallest buildings and you go out there, it's not loud.
Right.
And it's not cacophonous, and you can see all over the place. Mm-hmm. Right? You can get a little perspective. You can get a little space. It's a great way to picture the gap.
Good point.
And because we look from a higher perspective, and we sit there, and it's like taking my beach chair out on the top of the big building and just hanging out there having a picnic, have a little wine.
Right. So you're right. getting yourself out of the level of all the conflict and noise and everything, right. and getting a higher perspective. And this reminds me, I was reading somewhere about bald eagles, because where I grew up, there were no bald eagles, and where I am now, I see them frequently, and they have a higher perspective, right?
Yes.
They're constantly flying in those, oh goodness, what do you call them? The warm,
the spirals,
the drafts. They're catching the warm air that's rising, and their eyesight is really amazing if they're able to see fish in the water, right? From a tree outside the water. And so being outside, above and higher than all the problems and sounds really does give you an opportunity to practice neutrality. But if you're down in it, much more difficult.
It is. And, like I said, it's a practice. Nobody, until we really have mastery of these things, all the rest of us, you and me and all the rest of us, we're just, we're in it, we're out of it. We fall in the mud, we take showers. It doesn't matter, right? But to know that we can change. Like, I really like that one quote you said from Eckhart Tolle, because it's like, can we notice that we're thinking? Can we notice what we're thinking? Can we notice that we can shift what we're thinking? All of this, there's gaps in there where we can start to notice that this is not all just happening to us. It's not happening to us. Actually, we're doing it. And we can choose a different way.
That's an important part. I want to emphasize that these things are not happening to us. We're choosing it. I think that's one of the most difficult shifts to make.
It is, because it seems like it's happening to me. And then to start to let that rambunctious horse, let me ride it. It takes something. But it's a beautiful relationship that I can develop with my own intellect, with my own analyzer, right? It's not a matter of beating it up or telling it's bad or telling it to shut up, right? I value my intellect. I value your intellect. It's wonderful. It's a matter of, can we dance? Can we dance in ways that are productive?
And if you tell it that it's bad, if you're trying to fight with it, then you're staying in the same level. You're still in the problem.
Yes. Still in judgment.
You're not getting out of it. Well
said.
Right.
It's different level of thinking bad things about myself. It's just self-whipping is what it is. And a lot in meditation, people are like, oh, it's the hamster wheel. Oh, shut up. It's just like, how about you just let the thought come in the front door and out the back door, and don't serve it tea?
Right. I love that. Don't serve it tea. Don't ask it to sit down and stay.
Right? It's like, oh, how interesting. That's nice. The back door is open, right? That's not mine. That's one of the Eastern practices, but it's so useful.
It really is, because it's true. How many of us, a thought comes in the door and we think not only do we have to ask it to tea, but keep it for dinner too, and then give it a room to stay for the night.
Right. And then we develop, and I've been here, and I still have some of this, but it's so much less. So I can tell you, it really changes. That we get grooves in our thinking, and it's just the record just plays over and over. And I bet you have something to say about how the biology of that is.
Well, yeah, you're describing the grooves, and that's the stimulation of a neural groove, right? It's a groove in a record and a groove in your brain. And the more you stimulate it, the easier it is for the nerves to get fired in that particular pattern.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And then we start to discipline ourselves to stop playing that record and play, for me, it's all about playing a different record. I don't want to focus on not doing that record. I want to focus on a record I enjoy more and making those grooves, right? Let's make a record we like and play that.
Yes. Yep. It's like trying to, I don't know if you've ever been ice skating, but sometimes there are cracks or grooves in the ice. Mm-hmm. And when you try to skate out of them, they keep drawing you back in, especially if you're new, right? You're like, I'm trying to get out, but it pulled me back in. and you have to actually make a break, right? You have to
Yes.
turn and get out of those grooves, turn your skate dramatically, and you might fall. That's what makes it difficult, right? You might fall down trying to get out of those grooves.
We call it learning.
Yes, they call it learning. So is there anything else you'd like to say as we wrap up this content of thought-provoking heart?
One of the things I like best about this conversation is really distinguishing, to not judge ourselves about the judging, to not have negative thoughts about our negative thoughts, right? It's just perpetuating what we don't want. And instead, like we were just talking about, and we talked about in at least one other show about if we have difficult childhood or if something happens in our life, it's easy to keep that vibration. It's easy to keep that perpetuating that pattern.
The
and
record
can we choose? We're not saying none of that happened. We're not making it go away. We're just saying, how about we play some old time rock and roll and shimmy and shake around the house, right? Like, let's put in something that we want here, something fun.
Yeah, and I really, I want to acknowledge that point, because we all have a history. We all have experiences. And interestingly enough, those experiences are held in our memory banks because there was a stimulus, right? Something happened and a strong emotional response. And that's what creates a memory. So just to pull it all back around from last week and prior weeks, our nervous system has two buttons. There's the I feel safe or I don't feel safe, right? And when you create memories, they're based on experiences and some very dramatic emotional input. And when we have, whether it's traumatic or not experiences, right, we can decide to take that record off. You can keep the record if you want, right? Just set it down, but you get to play a different record. And we're not denying that anything didn't happen to you, but you don't have to relive it. And that's the important piece, right? We don't know the reason it happened or the purpose it served, but you don't have to keep playing a record that was a difficult record. You can choose a new one.
Yes, and I'd like to say, not everyone knows how to do that.
That's true.
You and I both have technology that really helps people make that choice, to make that change. I just really want to say that.
Yeah, that's important, because living by heart is one way to do it, right? Living by heart is one of the tools. And I will say, if you struggle with the idea of living by heart because, one, you can't reach your heart, you don't know how to get to it, you think there's just too much going on or too much history in your life, and you can't get past all that in order to find out what it means for you to live by heart, you should contact Wendy, because she will totally help you with that. It's an It's an amazing way to live. When you're able to live by heart, what does it mean? It means you're not living by what you think, right? You're not constantly judging yourself. Your thoughts aren't always negative. You might have one now and again, but that's not your everyday, day in and day out, overwhelmed frustration, right? Negative thinking. And living by heart, there's so much freedom and so much peace and joy. Wendy has it, I have it, and we want to share it with you. So thank you so much today for watching our Live by Heart Today show. If this message spoke to you, please tell us what's on your heart by leaving us a comment. And for more information, you can go to our website, livebyhearttoday.com. From our heart to yours, creating a better tomorrow when you live by heart today.
And that concludes this portion of
Live by Heart Today!
Thank you for watching. View more episodes on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, We Are Historically, for making this show possible.